welcome back to Conservation Stories. I'm glad to have a good friend of mine, Jeremy Brown. He is an old family friend. Our grandparents were neighbors for many, many years in Brownfield, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeremy joined us earlier today for a roundtable, which is probably came out several months before you're seeing this today. And so we may reference some of that as we're visiting. We talked a little bit about your production practices and some of those things. And I'd like for us to just kind of go into more detail about, what puts you on this path and what keeps you there, and some specifics about what your year-to-year farm practices look like. So why don't you start by giving us a little bit of background about yourself and tell us about your family too.
Yeah. So, I'm married and I have 5 kids. So that's an adventure.
Same.
Yeah. Well, I have 4 girls on top of that.
Oh, wow.
So
yeah.
people often wonder, why do you farm all the land you farm? I'm like, well, every time I add a girl to the mix, I've got to have more land. So no, it's a blessing. My wife actually grew up on a farm too. So we both have that love for the land.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm a 5th generation farmer. I say that because I grew up, my dad gave me my first farm when I was 15 years old. It was a little 40-acre farm. And so I grew up farming with my dad, my uncle, my granddad. We were all a family operation, and my great-grandfather would come out and tell us what we were doing wrong. And that's how it is in farming. And but as I've said before, the 80s and the 90s were not the best in production agriculture, and there was a lot of challenges, and especially coming out of the 80s, the farm crisis. And so when I went to college in late 90s, early 2000s, my dad decided that he had had enough of it, and the pressures and the financial pressures of production agriculture had gotten too much. And so he made a career change, and it just really turned my life upside down, because that was the path I was ready to farm. And so that door was closed. But looking back now, I tell people there was about a 10-year gap from the time he got out to the time I got back into it. It was almost 10 years. And I'm now thankful for those 10 years.
Oh, yeah.
Because during those 10 years, I learned new ways. I saw the different production practices. And I knew without a shadow of doubt I wanted to farm. I think so many times kids just take over a business, and maybe that's not their passion. Maybe that's not what they love. And being away from it, I knew without any doubt that I want to farm. And I've tried other jobs, and they were great, and I could be successful at that, but it's not my passion.
Right. It reminds me, Doug and I, my husband and I we went out of farming. We went out of farming through bankruptcy, and it was really, really difficult. And the years leading up to that, the tax ramifications of trying to get out. What do we do? He was in his 40s, and it just felt like wrong to change careers at that time. And until we had no choice. And I would ask him, if you could do anything else, what would you do? And he would say, farm. That is why I'm farming. And when we had been out about 5 or so years, and he's a landman now, lots of detailed spreadsheets and leasehold agreements and lots of different complicated title. And he told me not long, 5 years into it, I didn't know what it was like to do what I was made to do. I didn't know the difference, And so, he and I both will say now, there are some things that we miss about that life, and we both have we place so much value and importance on it. But it was a blessing, that for what happened to us. It's hard to see it when you're going through the fire of it, though.
Oh yeah, and I think that's anything in life. Your trials are where you grow, and you get pressed, and you come out normally stronger from it.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I get it absolutely.
So, I've heard you speak, and probably some people that are listening, watching, have heard you speak, but I always love to hear you tell about how you really just the light came on soil health.
Yeah. Well, and there's a part I probably don't tell much. A lot of people want to know why we name our operation Broadview. And when we were able to get back in the farm, and my father-in-law came to me and he said, "Look, I know you love this. I'll do what I can to help you, but I want us to farm separately."
Yeah.
And that's a part of my story too, because if he would have said, "I'm going to bring you into my operation," I probably wouldn't have had the opportunities to really think outside the box. I would have had to farm like he farms. And not that he's wrong. I'm just saying it's just different. And so Sarah and I, we're here. We are just putting the paperwork together to start a business. And we're like, what do we want to name it? Well, most farmers name it Brown Farms or, the family name or whatever. But we really wanted, for us, this was an answer to prayer. We'd been praying that God would provide some way for us to get back into farming. And my wife had read a passage in the Bible about how the land will be broad. And it was just like, when you look out here in West Texas, it's very broad.
It is.
And the views,
Go
forever. But it was so interesting because that was like, in 2008. And here we are now. And it's like, broadview agriculture, it describes the area that we farm, but it also describes our philosophy. We have a really broad view of things. Like we try not to be so narrowly focused. And like I said, I've got areas that I could always grow. So that was, early on, the reason why I say all that is because I'm a person of faith, I truly, truly believe that this is an answer to prayer, and every piece of land I get, the opportunity to farm, it's God's creation. And so through that journey early on, if we get into 2008, 2009, 2010, 2010 was the first year I started in 2008, and then 2010 was the first year I quit my day job to farm full time. So there was a period there where I kept my day job and trying to make it work. So 2010 came along, we had a great year, and that was a good year, and I didn't have a lot of land, but I was just basically farming. And what was crazy was in that 10-year gap, that my dad quit and I got back into it, production agriculture drastically changed. GMO technology really came on the scene. It was very early stages, but now you could grow a plant and spray a chemical and it wouldn't hurt that plant, but it'd kill all the weeds. I mean, it was just like...
It changed
everything. And then they also bred new varieties of cotton. And now, when I was a kid, if a guy made a certain yield, we thought that was great. Now they're making twice as much.
Yes.
But they were also putting out way more fertilizer, and so there were some things there that early on I thought, wow, this is easy, is what I thought.
Yeah.
But what I found is that the promises that they call it the green revolution, the introduction of technology that those promises were failing. I saw that kind of early on, like, we get into a drought and we're still spending the same amount of money, and now we're not making the crop, we're not making the yield, but yet our expenses are high. And so anyways, and like I said, I had this one organic farm that I was watching, and I was like, I had one organic farm and then I had a non-organic farm, and I was spending all this money over here and not spending any money over here, and they were still making the same amount of cotton. And so it kind of just, all through that, I was just kind of watching things. And then but the aha moment that you speak of was about 2013, if my memory is right. And I was just reading my Bible, and I read the parable of the seed and the sower. And I know there's a spiritual application for all that, but Jesus just simply says, and some seed fell on good soil and it reaped a harvest 100-fold. Well,
because the soil was good.
Because the soil's good. And I told a guy that one time. He said, that really shouldn't be a parable about the seed. It should be a parable about the soil. And he's exactly right. And so, we, and I just had this moment where I just, in my faith, God just said, Jeremy, what's good soil? And I did not have, I had a science answer. Right. I had a chemistry answer. I had this is what I was taught in school, my degree's in agriculture. This is what my salesman tells me. And this is but I really didn't know. And so that began a journey, and I'm still on that journey, that how was this created to function without all this other stuff? Like, how did it function for thousands of years before we came in here and destroyed it and tried to grow cotton or whatever on it? How can you walk into a natural prairie grass or a forest and it does just fine without any of our help? But the minute we step on and take it under control, it's like you're fighting against nature at times. And so, that began the journey that I'm still on and still learning and adapting and, still haven't figured it out. And being an organic farmer, it creates more creativity because you don't have those chemicals or those fertilizers, but you also have the tillage aspect. And so how do we work in those parameters of the 6 soil health principles? And so, so that was like 2013. I tell people I was on the fence. Like I feel like I had 1 foot in and 1 foot out. And what really got me, I don't know if I've told this story a whole lot, but in 2019, I had a little bit of organic land. By this time it was about 1/3 of my acres. But I still was chasing yield.
Right.
I still was buying into, you got to maximize that water. You got to maximize your production. Yeah, I was doing some soil health regenerative practices, but I still was so focused on that was the goal. And in 2019, I had one of those years that every farmer has it. It just hurt. We got there, the crop looked decent. We get in there to harvest the crop, and it's not there. It's not there.
It's not there.
And I'm telling you that's humbling.
Yeah.
It's humbling, and it's scary. It's scary, to be honest, especially as when you've walked through that journey with my dad had the same story. Yeah. It was tough. And I remember I might get a little emotional.
I'm trying not to cry because I know exactly what you're talking about.
I remember I was really, really questioning because I was like, okay, God, I'm really trying to do this your way. And so I went out. We live out in the country, and a lot of times I'll go walk behind my house and just talk to the Father. And I was talking to God and almost complaining, like, okay, what's the deal? What's going on here? This is not how this is supposed to go. Right. And I simply heard him say, Jeremy, you're going to become a better farmer because of this. And I was like, that doesn't sound fun, but okay, if that's what you want to do. And so that was where I referenced this in our talk earlier, but I'll say it again. When I begin to see, that's when that quote, if you want to make small changes, you change what you do. That's what I was doing. Right. I wanted some small changes. I was changing some of the techniques. Now, to make major changes, you change the way you see things. Now I'm seeing it differently.
Right.
And I'm seeing it's not about yield. It's not about maximizing and trying to make all this and all that. It's about just functioning with what God has given us in our dry climate. And so, man, I began to just get down to the bare minimum of farming, like wide row, and just, I don't know, I just was like, take me down this journey wherever you want me to go. And that's where I've ended up, now, that was in 2019, and now here we are in 2024, starting 2024, and I'm like, wow. I mean, since 2019, I started doing wide row cotton, started my cover crop techniques changed. That's when we started, instead of planting them in November, we started planting them in August. And now we're growing covers. And then we started integrating the livestock and really figuring out how that fits. And I'm like, well, if I can plant covers in August, we're harvesting cotton in November. As soon as that machine's out of the field, we're bringing in the cattle. And so you take like in 23, we had 1,000 head of cattle across all of our land. Now I'm generating income in places I never believed. And now right now, this morning we sell organic hard red wheat to people that are making bread.
Yes.
We're just new doors of opportunities have just started opening. And so, and now we just recently bought our first purebred of Bonzarama cattle that we're mob grazing, which is so fun because here's what's crazy about it is my dad, who did not want to get out of farming, loves production agriculture, now works for me.
Oh my goodness.
And he gets to spend the rest of his life moving cows, which brings him the most joy every day. He goes out there, and this morning he calls me. He's like, "They were waiting for me," and I was, "Who's waiting? The mamas." He goes out there, and they're literally waiting for him, and he just gets so excited. He just opens the gate, and they go, and then he gets a paycheck. So it's a win-win situation. It's just, and it's so fun to see. And all glory to God. I take no credit for that because, and I'm not ashamed of that because it is totally His hand. yes, I had to be obedient and try to listen and step out there in faith and try to go against the grain, but yet to look back and think, and don't get me wrong, I still got trials and still got things that don't work. And, at times where I'm like, oh my gosh, how's this going to work out? But it's been fun on this journey that he's had me on to where we are today. And I'm excited to see where he's going to take me.
Years ago, I was introduced to a preacher named Tim Keller. I don't know oh my goodness. And I love how he explains, like, is it us or is it God? And he's like, God's math isn't like ours. It's 100% him and 100% us.
Absolutely.
And so it's a fun quote to think about when you're thinking about how much effort, that we're required to put in.
Absolutely.
That the Lord is interested in still, us participating and doing our best.
Absolutely. Yeah.
One of the statements that you mentioned in the roundtable discussion, and folks may want to go back and listen to that if they haven't seen it, talking about this land and what this land was like before the Dust Bowl, before, folks came in and really, and really the folks that were here and that kind of created that problem are not the folks that stayed here, right? Because you had a lot of people coming in that would plow up huge swaths of land, plant it, and leave. And they weren't here. They would come back and harvest, and it created the situation that, eventually led to the Dust Bowl. This podcast is sponsored by Carter Key Farms. With roots stretching back to 1887, Carter Key Farms is a great example of heritage and quality. The Vardeman family, now in their 5th generation on the cotton farm and 8th generation on the ranch, continues a legacy of producing some of the finest beef and pork in Texas. This is a place where history and modern practices blend to create a product that stands apart. The farm's dedication to quality is evident in every cut of meat. Experience the exceptional taste of Carter Key Farms. From succulent steaks to savory pork sausage, order your meat online today for local delivery or shipping at Cotter-Key, COTTERKEY farms.com. The ecology of this area and how the buffalo mobbed, grazed this land, and what you're really doing is trying to go back and mimic the way that this land was really initially. And what are your thoughts about the economics behind, county after county going back into grazing?
Yeah.
What's that going to look like for farmers?
Yeah. I don't know. That's what's hard is we've created a system, and I'm not saying it's good or bad, but where the industry in this whole area is set up for cotton farming. And how do you go back? And it's amazing to me. I tell people, like, if anybody's been in farming, it's amazing to me how quickly this land goes back to grass without my effort at all.
Yeah.
I've had farms where maybe the corners of a pivot were not, there was no reason to farm them, so I just planted a cover crop and then we grazed it, and then within 2 to 3 years it's grass without me even planting the grass. I mean, it just comes. And so that tells me, okay, that's what the land was created to do. And I think the challenge that is in that arena is those people that if you're going to go to that, you're going to have to change that production practice. The guys that do the adaptive grazing or the mob grazing, whatever you want to call it, holistic grazing in Cornell and Savory, that what they have found is if you manage your grazing system right, you can actually increase your stock density.
Yes.
The land does better, everything does better. What kills us out here is this, they call it the Christopher Columbus type of grazing, where you will release your cattle and you come back the next year and you're like, oh wow, look, we have cows. It's just attitude of, we put up a fence, we just let them do their thing. It's going to take more management. And I don't know, so many people are just so close-minded, and so that's a challenge I see on the future.
Yeah.
But they're seeing some great successes in that. What we're trying to do on our farm operation is I so much believe in it. I don't own a bunch of land. Most of my land's rented. But one of the farms that I bought, I've put it back in the native grasses. I've even planted some native species. But what I did was on that farm, I had a little bit of water, and so that I'm only using the water to grow 40 acres of organic cotton. The other 120 acres is grass. And so to me, being diversified in your operation is the way a person could do that, where maybe they don't do it all. So another example, in about 3 years ago, there was a section, 640 acres of CRP land that was in the Conservation Reserve Program. And the landowner came to me and said, "Hey, would you lease this for a cash lease?" Which gives me the freedom to farm it. That's so nice. Yes. It gives me the freedom to do it. Well, I would say every other farmer out here in West Texas would have taken a plow and they would have destroyed every bit of that grass. Right. Because it can go right into organics. Because of what I've learned and where I'm at in my journey, out of that 640, I left 400 we only put 120 of it in production, and the rest I left in grass. And so what I'm trying to do is just, I can have a little bit of production I took some of the best parts of this farm and put that in an organic cotton production and organic wheat for my little side business. And then we left the rest in grass, where we're using the livestock to graze and to restore the land. And so I think that could be a way where we could bring both practices into play and be diversified. Right. Where a person might say, "Well, I can't do it all." Well, say your pivots, say you have a circle that's 120 acres and you don't have enough water to do 120. Right. Why don't put 60 of it in grass? And do it that way or something. Just be creative and think outside the box. And I have found, this is what's interesting. I go over there to that 640 acres out of my 5,000. I spend more time on that piece of land, and I don't know why. The only thing I can figure out is I feel like I'm doing what the land was created to do. And a lot of other farms, I'm trying to force it to do something. And so I go over there and I see coveys of quail and I get excited. I see, I see the deer. I see, in my Regenified certification, they measure insects and they measure birds. And, when you're mob grazing, they see bird population increase. I mean, there's just so many benefits. Yes. And so that's exciting, but yet it's a challenge. And I don't know how you get, especially from a landowner, say a landowner, that's what's hard. Say a landowner bought a farm, an irrigated farm. This is what concerns me. Yeah. Is a landowner buys a farm at $2,000 or whatever an acre. More than that, probably. For water that's going away. And they're expecting 5 to 7% return on that investment. That puts pressure on that farmer to perform. Yeah. And that's trying to outperform our environment, and I don't know how sustainable that is. Right. So, but I recently was in Marfa and visited the Dixon Water Foundation, their ranch, the Mims Ranch down there, and we learned in detail how they've been doing their mob grazing there, and have broken up into like 250-acre triangles, and then those are broken into further small one-day plots, One-day plots, yeah, and it's just amazing to hear them and see like the difference between, because they've kept, a control portion of the ranch and graze it at the grazing rate, the recommended grazing rate, and comparing, they said you can pull up literally the same grass on this side of the fence and this side of the fence, and the roots on the mob side is just so much longer. It's so much longer. Because they don't have time, to just eat just what they want, going through and just picking the things that they want. They're having to. And I love the way he explained if they choose, they're going to choose what they like the most. Selective grazing. Yes, so they're going to pick that. And he said when children come to the ranch, he tells them that the leaf is the solar, like the battery. It's the,
it's the solar panel kind of. Solar panel and the roots are the battery. And if they come and they eat the solar panel off, there's still some energy in the roots. And then so it'll create another leaf. But if they come and eat that off again, there's no way to recharge the battery.
Roots start dying. Yeah.
And that made so much sense to me. I guess I'm an elementary student.
Yeah.
But I, just thought, what a great way to understand that,
It
know.
is. Yeah. Alan Savory's book, Holistic Management, for me, was the best.
Yes, that's actually who he referenced.
Yeah, because he talks about you have different environments, and the environment we farm in and where that is, it's a brittle. Yes. He calls it a brittle environment. And how you manage that grass is different than a non-brittle environment. But you're exactly right. If anytime grass is eaten more than 50% of its above ground, once it goes below 50% of that, then the root system starts dying. And that's why you go to drive through New Mexico and it looks like a desert.
Yes.
When that should be looking like a prairie grass, but it's been overgrazed.
And I think too, there's a kind of this sense, I get a sense from sometimes when I talk to people that if we leave nature alone, nature does what it is made to do. But you, as a man of faith, I can think what you're thinking too, and me is like, it's a broken system. Yeah. And so we're here to help repair and restore, that broken system. And how can we best do that? And I feel like we really are in a, we're in a take mindset. And, in a lot of things that we do. We've become very much a nation of high, consuming. We produce so much plastic trash and clothing trash, and we're polluting the whole world. And that's not to say that there's not great things about the system that we have, but I think we've been unaware of the fact that things that are good can have unintended negative consequences.
Absolutely.
And I think that to your point about GMOs, that is, there's great things about them, but there's also some unintended consequences, and we have to be honest about what those are.
Absolutely. Yeah. Normally, it seems like a lot of times we'll go try to fix one problem, but we don't realize it just created 100 more problems. We might have fixed that one, but yet, and I think in production agriculture, now that we have resistant weeds for those that do use chemicals, the problem just continues to get worse, and it's not the answer, unfortunately. Right. And anyway, so, but it's encouraging. I'm seeing more and more, people asking questions, I guess, is
Certainly.
really what I would describe that as. They're asking questions, and they're meaning like, is this really working? Like, is this this really the best way?
Right.
We see it, people asking questions about their health, about the pharmaceutical industry, people asking questions about is chemistry in general the answer to a lot of our issues in life that we're dealing with. And so that, I think that's where you start.
Yeah. And I think that, part of our food system is really built around, created, around those large commodity crops that, need those markets, they need those offtakes, and it's not the farmer that's making the money on those, and so I wonder sometimes I've started to see like regenerative, soup. Okay. You see a can of soup at Sprouts and it's like 4 times the cost of the traditional one. And I think, who's making the money on that? Yeah. I know we've got some of these, climate smart grants that are going to some of these big companies that are making this food. And when that grant money is gone, that's going to the farmer going to continue to get some type of incentive? Yeah. Or is that to buy that type of regeneratively grown food?
Yeah. Well, that's the reason why, in our roundtable discussion, I didn't get into that, but in the regenerative world, what I'm seeing is it's kind of wild, wild west still right now.
Yeah.
And what concerns me is I don't want the greenwashing effect where, you just check this box and you're regenerative, and that can easily happen. In the organic world, that's a little harder to do because you really don't have the certain tools, but in the regenerative world, you could be spraying 100 times a year and check the box that you don't till, and you might could fit their little deal. And so that's, I'm regenerative certified, and the group that I went with is called Regenified. And the reason why I went with that group is because they are farmers,
Right.
and not industry. Because I'm afraid, like you get
I
the
agree.
you get the big industry
Yes.
people like
Yes.
Kellogg's or anybody like that. They're just trying to
Yes.
find another market to
Yes.
sell at a higher price. But what I like about Regenified is they're trying to create those markets that premium goes directly to that farmer.
Yes, and that is something. I was in California recently, and one of the things that I, for as much hate as we send that way to California and, places like New Mexico and all of the policies and all of that, those policies have driven a lot of innovation, and they have forced people to make some changes that they wouldn't have made that they have now found beneficial. In particular, we met earlier this year in Maryland with a family that their farm is a watershed into the Chesapeake Bay.
Oh, yeah.
And so they were the very first to be policed on their nitrogen. And we asked, there were a group of us there, and we had literally three of us asked, because their answer, no one just blew everybody away. It was like, that can't be true.
Yeah.
And we said, like, how is that kind of worked out, and this type of policy, policing. And they said, well, first we were convinced that they were trying to get rid of farmers. And now we're like, you know what? We found out we're saving money.
Yeah.
It saved us money.
Yeah.
And so that's just been kind of an amazing benefit to them, So, but back to California, just, creating that I am not promoting that we should become overly
Regulated. Yeah.
Thank you. But what the almond growers there, they're creating their own. They're building their own sustainability plan because they know it's coming to them. They know they're going to be policed. They already are policed. And they're like, when we get to that place and they've come to us, we're going to say, we're already doing it.
Yeah.
And and I've asked that question here to several, people in leadership, like, why can we not here define our own certification? Like, this is what this looks like in this region, in this area.
Well, and I think like the National Cotton Council, I think that's what they're trying to attempt with the U.S. Cotton Trust Protocol.
Protocol.
But once again, my concern with that, as someone that's looked at it, is it's a lot of just checking boxes. And it goes back to what I said earlier. Like, some of this is you got to believe in what you're doing. Like, if you're just doing it just to check a box so that I can maybe get another cent or two, I'm afraid that as soon as that cent or two is gone, then those practices will be gone. And so how do you, that's where a lot of people in the organic world, that I've operated in, a lot of people wonder a lot of times, well, would you be organic if you couldn't sell it for a premium? And I would say, I can honestly say from my operation, I would, because I believe in the way I farm. But, there might be a handful of people out there that are just chasing that, but I found that those people normally kind of go with whatever the wind's blowing, the direction the wind's blowing. So, and I think you're going to see that in the regenerative too, that there's going to be those that just do it just to maybe get some sort of premium.
Well, there is certainly for sure, and we didn't really even get into discussing much of that, but, Vardeman's work real closely with Madewell J. Crew and get premium, for what they sell. And I know that the demand is really high.
Yeah.
And I think the interesting thing is, like, as Lacy and I have traveled this year and met with a lot of those folks on that end of the supply chain, is they're becoming more and more open and hearing more and understanding more about what it's like.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
And so I think one of the things that would benefit is that the world is so much different now. I mean, I remember when I was growing up in the 80s and my mom was grinding wheat. We were ordering wheat in from Montana, hard red winter wheat, and making us bread. And she'd have to shape it into like a little turtle, cut the shell off so that we would put it in our mouth because we were completely grossed out, when everybody else was eating white Wonder Bread. But and now, I mean, it's like I think back to that's the best thing that she could have ever done for us,
absolutely.
And but my dad, I can remember him trying to grow some triticale, trying to grow some things that people might want to, buy, like you're doing. But the timing now, you have Facebook.
Oh, yeah.
You've got this social media, you've got, ways and outlets to sell those things.
You can,
and so I do think that culturally, ultimately for every farmer, the consumer that's their customer,
Absolutely.
And so you begin to work and you do what they're demanding, and if the consumer continues in the direction that they're going, a lot of these things will be, you're doing them because if you don't, you're not selling anything.
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. We're seeing that in the organic world, too, that, there's just, it seems like after COVID that there was a heightened alert to what people are eating and even clothing, like what are they?
Yes.
And so you're seeing more and more of a, like I said, it goes back to their questioning what they've been told or what they've been sold.
Yeah.
And that's different. Everybody's on a different scale there. But it's most definitely, I don't know, different climate, different environment today than it was. Yeah.
I think so. And there's a lot to be admired about this generation. They get a lot of flack, but there's a lot to be admired about them, and that they maybe their values aren't the same, but they are consistent to their values.
That's true.
So
Absolutely.
often,
Yeah, absolutely.
And I admire that in them, And they are the ones that are pushing for a lot of the change. And going back to what we talked about in the roundtable, as far as, working together and really being sure that we're, trying to, as agriculture, support each other. And, we do need to be educating people. But I do think there's a fear of us, what's going to happen if we say, oh, one time we used too many chemicals, because we are, no one wants to get sued, and so you admit those things, and you live in this world where it's a little scary to admit, to be vulnerable, or I did this in the past and I don't do it anymore. And I know in our work on the energy side, they face the same thing. Yes, we at one time, had these practices that were really bad, but we really are working to clean up our act.
Exactly.
We're working really, really hard.
Yeah.
And here's the, billions of dollars in investment that's going towards that. And here are the things that we're doing. But and you're saying if we're doing good now, then we're saying we did bad then. And then, it's a catch-22.
Yeah, it is. I think also, though, that from my experience is just when you're transparent with people, and you're real with them about your journey, and, for instance, a lot of people do, like previous generations or even my neighbor farmers, they do the way they're doing because they don't know any better, like that's just how they were taught. And especially in production agriculture, we said this earlier, but it's such a generational business. And so many guys I know that are my age, they farmed just like their dad farmed, and he farmed just like his dad farmed. And I'm not saying that was wrong, but it's hard to go against that.
Yes.
It's hard to,
if you want to try
if you want to try something different. And so
you're definitely swimming upstream.
Yeah, you are. I mean, I know even in my family dealing with, with my in-laws, even though we don't farm together, sometimes I think they feel like I think the way they're farming is wrong.
Right.
And it's not that. It's just more a different opinion.
Well, and I think that that's part of our culture now. People do not know how to deal with differences of opinion.
No.
And I wonder, I don't know if it's worse where we are because we've been so everyone has been just alike here, for so long. And with the internet, and people are moving in and we're changing, and so it is, then that really was the reason to have the roundtable discussion, is to say, these are people who, like, in some ways, Lacy has almost nothing in common with these two organic farmers, but the admiration for both of you that she has, is that is the thing that we're going to have to overcome. Is it's not wrong, it's different.
Oh yeah, well I get that from there's a handful of farmers in this area that have got into the soil health, and they won't even hardly talk to me because I have a little bit of tillage because I'm an organic guy. And it's almost like,
Yeah, no,
I
that
mean,
we gotta, we
we
can't, yeah.
really should have the same goals, how we
Yes.
get there,
Yeah.
and how we, our production practices can vary.
Right.
Now, I will say, there are some things that I have a pretty strong opinion about. Like, I'll just, and I don't mind sharing this one. It's 2024, and if you farm in West Texas and your land's blown away, it's time you change.
Yeah.
Those are some things that are non-negotiable. If you're running an irrigation system and the wind's blowing 30 miles per hour,
Yes.
you need to turn it off.
You gotta turn it off.
Those are just some things that,
Right.
and I don't care if they get mad,
Yes.
those things got to change.
Yeah.
Those are production practices that are not sustainable. Now, how you do that, how you change that can be up to you. But,
Right.
2 weeks ago we had these windstorms and it was the sky was blowing. I had neighbors blowing away. I just feel like we know too much now to have any excuse
Yes.
to allow that to happen.
Yeah.
And so there's some things, it's like my pastor says, he says, there's some things that there's non-negotiables. Like we got to agree on these few things. Like these are foundational for your
Right.
faith.
Right.
There's some things that are negotiable. Like,
Yes. Right. Right. Yes.
baptism, whatever.
Right.
And so, where there's not a clear, and so I think, he has a great slogan of how it goes, but it's the
Yes.
same deal. There's just some things that I think are non-negotiable.
Right.
that we've got to have a common goal to see things actually change, especially in our region, with our water and with our soil erosion.
Yes. Yeah.
There's one farmer in particular I think about in my area. I don't know how much topsoil he's got left because it just blows all the time.
Well, Jeremy, we've covered a lot of ground today, and I sure appreciate your time
Sure.
and appreciate your passion and pioneering spirit, and grateful for what you're doing.
Well, thank you.
Grateful. And so
thank
much
you.
respect for your family, for your grandparents. And
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. There's a picture of their farm on my wall that I think about a lot, and how, if he was still here, like, he'd probably think some of the things I'm doing is crazy too. There's a quote that Gabe Brown says, and I quote his book a lot, but I just love that book. But he says, all my neighbors make fun of me because I'm so weird, and I just make fun of them because they're all the same. And I think about that a lot. But
Exactly.
I'm just honored and humbled that God gives me the opportunity to do what I do, because it's a dream come true for me. There's not one day I don't love what I do, and so.
Well, it really is an amazing story, because it is extremely difficult to start from zero.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, you often hear you can't do it. You
Yeah.
can't do it. You
Yeah.
can't do it. And you did it at a time when you weren't getting a lot of, the beginning farmer grants are a big thing now.
Yeah.
And that wasn't happening back then.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, and I want to give credit. I mean, my father-in-law was gracious, and he rented me a farm and
Yes.
said, "Here's a tractor. I'll let you use when you need it." And for a couple years there, but he also appreciated him
Yes.
not bringing me into his operation, because he wanted me to have the freedom to do it the way I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
And that's unique, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
So,
Well, thanks again for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you, friends, for joining us again for Conservation Stories. We look forward to visiting with you again.